You can go to Twitter to follow Ryan Abraham and his content, opinions, and more at Inside Troy, publisher, owner of USCFootball.com, Heisman voter, and he joins us. It's been a while, Ryan. Thanks for your time. You're with Paul and Smokey on 365 Sports. So is it fair to say that when USC hired Lincoln Riley, and obviously Caleb Williams and all that came with it, and they had a pretty fun first year, but they didn't hire him to be kind of stuck in neutral? Is that a concern right now, or is it going to just take time and maybe the first year with Caleb and company there was enough there?
No, I think it's a fair point. I mean, expectations after the 4-8 season when Lincoln Riley took over weren't super high. I think if they won 8 games in that year one and then won 11 in year two, things might look a little bit different. But coming out of the gate, winning 11 games and winning a Heisman Trophy, I think the expectations just got ratcheted up last year. And the way they finished the season, outside of the bowl game, it just was a disaster. And the defense was really bad for 2 years in a row. So I feel like Lincoln Riley had to come in and fix a lot of problems that were around this football program. But you expected more from last year. And I think the expectations going into year one of Big Ten play is going to be high as well. It's a really tough schedule. So I think this is a really important year for Lincoln Riley, but you're right. There's a little shine that's come off of it just because of the way they finished last year and maybe some of the comments he's made during the offseason as they're getting ready to start Big Ten play.
Do you think that the new defensive coordinator and the new players they have on defense can make an impact right away, or is this something that may take a minute?
I think so. So D'Anton Lynn comes over. He came to UCLA last year from the Baltimore Ravens. And a lot of times you see NFL coaches come in and try to run an offense or a defense in college, and it doesn't work all that well because they're not used to, hey, you only got 20 hours a week with these guys and everything. But D'Anton Lynn was able to adapt really quickly. I think UCLA was ranked in the 90s or so the year before he got there. Pretty much the same personnel, and they were a top 20 type of a defense when he got there. So I think USC is hoping for some similar results. I think UCLA's defensive line talent was a little better than USC's, but USC's really deep in the secondary. They got a bunch of good linebackers. I think they have enough talent on the defensive side of the ball, especially some of the guys they've added. The weakness will probably be on that defensive line, but they're expecting D'Anton Lynn to be able to come in and kind of fix a lot of the schemes that were broken under Alex Grinch, and where guys were looking at their wristbands as the play clock was winding down and the balls being snapped. It just looked like chaos when USC was playing defense all last year, and they never really adjusted. I think the hope is that D'Anton Lynn can do that, and they can go from a really bad defense to at least like a mediocre defense and probably win a bunch more games.
Ryan, it seemed like Lincoln Riley at times is questioned for what he wants to do as far as strength of schedule. They're in the Big Ten. They're going to play people. They're going to end up playing a hard schedule. And they was asked about Notre Dame. I want you to make sure you clarify about Notre Dame, that history. And I remember, I go back to the days when Anthony Davis had 6 touchdowns in the early 70s, listening to the game while I was in Japan on the Far East Network radio outlet. Does he want to soften up their schedule or not?
I think it seems like from some of the comments he made that wouldn't be a terrible thing. But I feel like the way we are now in an expanded playoff, playing a very tough schedule doesn't hurt you as much because one loss isn't going to knock you out of the playoff. If you're in the Big Ten, you're in the SEC, top 3 or 4 teams are probably getting in every year. So this year they're playing LSU and Notre Dame in the out-of-conference schedule. Yeah, it's really tough. But they do avoid Ohio State and Oregon in conference. So I feel like it's one of those things. I don't think the fan base would go for it if they were going to get rid of the Notre Dame game. It's got like 100 years of tradition, and that's one of the reasons when you go to play for USC is you get that game on the schedule every year. So I think a lot of coaches are trying to figure out, what's the best way to navigate this whole new world of college football. But I don't think it's going to be a situation where you need to sort of dumb down the schedule. Yeah, you'd like to have more home games and stuff, and you have a really tough conference schedule. But if you have a traditional game like that, I don't think you're going to see a lot of programs getting rid of those. And in some cases, I think you're going to add them back in. Now, we get like Texas A&M because of, conference realignment, but you might get some more of those happen too down the road. So we'll see. But I don't think USC is getting rid of that anytime soon.
Was the heat he took for the LSU game leak justified?
Oh, yeah. So that was a weird one. I mean, both the agents for both Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley are the same agent, and there was some talk that maybe that was sort of going behind the scenes where you don't want your clients playing each other or something like that. But we've seen, people try to get out of sort of games like this, and especially when you're replacing a quarterback. But it's funny because both of those teams have a lot of similarities. Losing a Heisman Trophy quarterback, and what you're trying to fix a defense that was really putrid last year. There's a lot of parallels, I think, between the two programs. So yeah, I don't think there was any way this was going to go away. But I think some of this came from the agent side, where you got the two clients trying to play each other to start the season.
All right, so listen, we've discussed the defense a little bit. With what Riley is known for, which of course is the great quarterback play, recruiting, et cetera, and dynamic offense, is that who they should be, or is that going to be a different look this year?
I think you're going to have to take a step back when you have a generational talent like that leaving the program in Caleb Williams. But we've seen Lincoln Riley have a lot of success with a lot of different types of quarterbacks. And Miller Moss isn't well known, but a lot of people look at him as like chopped liver, but he was an Elite 11 quarterback as well. He's become a really great leader on this team. And I think you're going to see sort of the recipe of whatever the offense is, Miller Moss, following it closer than maybe what Caleb Williams did. More like a chef, he's more of a baker where you're following the ingredients correctly, and where Caleb Williams is like a chef where you're tinkering with things and going with what feels right. I think you're going to see Miller Moss work within the constraints of the offense, and that's worked really well in the past for different Lincoln Riley quarterbacks. So I think they're going to be fine on offense. If you go from like a top 3 to a top 10 offense, you're going to be okay. The question is going to be, if you can stay, as one of the elite offenses in the country, how much better can you get by being improved on the defensive side? So I think that's where everyone's going to look. If they do take a big step back on offense, it's going to be a real problem, because that's what Lincoln Riley's been really good at. So you don't want to see that go away. You just have to try to maintain that offensive prestige, but then also add it on the defensive side, which they haven't been able to do his first 2 years at USC.
Paul, they have LSU right off the top, Michigan, Wisconsin, fickle year, 2 for him?
Yeah.
Penn State, Washington, they got to change it, and then Notre Dame at the end. I mean, that doesn't include maybe a team or two that's a little bit better, like Rutgers or whoever else.
That doesn't sound so bad. That doesn't sound awful. That doesn't. Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm sure.
Wisconsin's the only one on that list that's not ranked as far as, and they might be at some point, but they're not. Yeah,
I'm sure you'll wake up and not a cold sweat many times. Ryan, what went down with Malachi Nelson?
Yeah,
because that just seems peculiar that here you are, the next, presumably one of the next guys in this Lincoln Riley quarterback run, and he just, I guess, didn't fit there.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where he was the 5-star quarterback recruit that he had, was bringing into USC, the one that you felt like would take over for Caleb Williams. We just never heard like he was lighting the world on fire at practice. And, we don't get to watch all of it anymore. We can see the beginning. He was a little slow. He had an injury coming out of high school, and it was kind of slow to get along, but it just never seemed to kind of catch up. But I think when you look at, if he ended up at like Georgia or something, you're like, all right, what happened with USC? He ends up at Boise State. It's a little bit different. You're not even at a Power 5 program. So what we had heard, I think he's a good kid, but it just didn't seem to click with him at USC. We'll see if he's able to kind of get something going at Boise, but it just some guys come in as a 5-star talent, and they just never kind of reach that potential. I think from what the coaches saw, it just didn't seem like he was going to get there, and it wasn't the best fit. So I know a lot of fans really wanted to see him succeed. It didn't work out. So it'll be interesting to kind of follow his career now that he's up in Pacific Northwest at Boise State.
At the quarterback position, with Miller Moss having that huge bowl game, but then Maeva, is that right? The transfer. Is this going to be back and forth, or is that Moss's job right now?
Yeah, I think it's Moss's job. We talked to Lincoln Riley after the spring game, and he had said, if there was a game tomorrow, that would be the case. We talked to Jade Maava in the offseason. He felt like he didn't have his best spring. I think he's got a lot of upside on the Maava side, being, coming in, playing as a freshman in the Mountain West, being freshman of the year and all that. I think there's upside there, but from what the people I've talked to at UNLV and from what we've seen, just didn't seem like he was kind of Big Ten ready yet. But I think they like, some of the tools he has. I'd be really shocked if maybe it's a package or something, but this looks like Miller Moss's team. He represented USC at Big Ten Media Days and really has won over the locker room. There's a lot of people just look up to him, similar to the way they did to Caleb Williams.
It's been kind of a weird year PR-wise for Lincoln Riley. Do you think he's maybe kind of – he had the whole kerfuffle with the young reporter last year, and, he does get kind of like weird at times, I guess. It's depending on your perspective, just seeing little clips of it. Has he kind of moved through that? Because his – whole vibe when he was at Oklahoma was this is a guy who's kind of loose and cool and everything, and it feels now like he's coaching a little tense.
Yeah, it's a different situation for sure. Like, you took over for Bob Stoops. You can be, he's not someone that's very open as far as practices and being with the media and stuff, and you can do that in Oklahoma. You can't do it in LA where you have two NFL teams. And, Caleb Williams was a Heisman Trophy winner, wasn't a top 20 sports star in the city, in Los Angeles. Like, it just, that was, if you have LeBron James and Kawhi Leonard and Shohei Ohtani and all these, he's not of that caliber. So you need to be more open. So I think that's been an adjustment. He's done it pretty well. I think he's been more open with the media and all that, but it really was a dumpster fire that he took over. So I think as a young coach, he's still kind of learning his ways, and maybe gets, defensive about something you don't really need to. And I think you're learning from all that. I think he's doing all right there, but it's definitely been some growing pains just because it's such a different situation where it's not a college town where you're the only game in town. Like, you have to compete for sports eyeballs, and you can't do that by closing everything down and not being open. So I think he's adjusted, or is adjusting to all that. And of course, not taking over something that was a well-oiled machine, making it your own. So we'll see. That's why I think this year is going to be very important, because there's just a lot of his kind of DNA that's going to be on this season. And, the schedule's tough, like you guys mentioned, but there's a lot of winnable games, but there's a lot of losable games too. So some of those coin flips have to go your way. And if they don't, I think there's going to be a lot of criticism going Lincoln Riley.
I know you've got something to do with what your job that you do, but if you looked at the four schools that are entering the Big Ten with Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA, is Oregon by far more prepared as far as this first year than the others because of Washington's coaching transition? It lost a lot of players. UCLA coaching transition, and then USC right now just kind of up in the air?
Yeah, I think Oregon's in a great spot right now. And, they've adapted to the new era of college football better than most. There's some schools that really have gone all in with the NIL stuff, and, Phil Knight being a part of that. Like, they've overpaid for a lot of players, but they've done it within these are, this is what the rules are in college football. USC was one of those schools that was a little more conservative, where they were like, hey, we're not supposed to involve recruits in the collectives and all this stuff. And they were behind as far as roster building goes, where Oregon was kind of all in from the beginning. I think similar to what we saw, Ohio State was sort of slow to adapt. And after getting beat by Michigan for the third year in a row and seeing their rivals win a championship, Ohio State was all in this offseason too. So I think those are two programs in the Big Ten that were just all in, all chips on the table for the offseason. For Ohio State, trying to get over the Michigan hump and get back to winning national championships. And for Oregon is make a big splash. They were not the first choice to go into the conference. They are not getting a full share going in there, but they want to make a huge splash going into the Big Ten. So I think they've done a really good job this offseason, and a lot of the other schools are playing catch-up, including USC, because what Oregon's been able to do, especially with NIL, is just almost unprecedented across the country.
Thank you, Ryan. Great stuff. Good to hear from you again. Thanks for being a part of the show, and enjoy the season. And we will be bothering you. Don't worry about it. We'll be back in touch.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys.
Ryan Abraham, Inside Troy. It's actually USCfootball.com. It's at Inside Troy on his Twitter feed.